Welcome everybody to the Advanced Export Control TechTalk for Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management. So today as presenters, it's my colleague Jeff Anderson, that is partner software engineer and has been developing all this functionality that you will see today, and myself. I'm Beatriz Nebot Gracia. I'm the product manager on Dynamics responsible for product information management and mass planning. Today, we'll be following this agenda where we will be introducing what this advanced export control functionality is, an overview of all the concepts that will be coming. Then we'll jump directly into a demo of the app itself, how it works, going through how to set up the environment, set up a jurisdiction, set up a product that will be used for export control, how do you actually use that product in a sales order when being sold, how to create custom roles and overrides, and how you can use export control in your other applications. Yes, you'll be able to use export control in other applications. Then we'll do a recap of resources and lastly, Q&A. So let's jump into it. Advanced export control is coming on the release 10.0.36 on preview. 10.0.36 release is already available for GA for self-update since September 15th, and you can also auto-update on LCS on September 29th. So you're already able to use this functionality and test it out yourselves. It comes with no additional cost. This means that it is there for you. It's included on your Dynamics licenses, and you'll see later it's a Dataverse app. So there's no charge whatsoever for the use of the app. It will still consume storage in your Dataverse, same as if you had any other app on Dataverse. Now we are releasing this advanced export control functionality for you. And you know that we already have dual use goods. So how does this relate? So dual use is already there. Some of you may already be using it. And how does these two work together? So the answer is they do not. We believe the advanced export control functionality we are releasing is more complete, covers more scenarios, including some custom ones that you're going to be able to do for your internal rules of your own company. And that is like more broader than the existing dual use goods. So with this functionality, we may see that some of you still stay with the dual use goods if that's what your company needs, fix with the business processes and you don't need anymore. Or some of you may want to transition to the new advanced export controls. You will take advantage of that flexibility and new functionality. So for this, you will be able to, either keep dual use or transition to the advanced export control. You choose yourselves. And it's possible to choose by legal entity if you want to use one or the other. Also useful in the case that you are transitioning, you don't have to do a full switch, but you can do one legal entity at a time. As I already hinted, it's a Dataverse solution, and this is so you can use it as well on other apps. It doesn't need to be just on Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management. You may have other apps related to sales, shipments, etc. It will be eligible to use them. As well, the fact that is in Dataverse means that you're going to be able to leverage the PowerFX language that is available, that as you'll see, gives a lot of flexibility when writing rules. It's very similar as if you were writing rules in Excel. With this, what is exactly coming on the advanced export control? So the possibility to set up jurisdictions is going to come. A jurisdiction is a set of codes, categories, restrictions, exceptions, and licenses. It represents a set of configurations that apply to incoming requests. Like, for example, the ITAR, the US International Traffic in Arms Regulation, the EU Dual Use, the US Export Control Administration Regulations, EAR, or in Norway, you may know the Norway List 1 and 2. Then come the codes and categories. The codes that make up jurisdiction are often referred as ECCNs, the export control classification numbers. Codes can be linked to one or more categories. So as an example, the same code can be linked to both missile technology and national security. So for your product, as you may know, you must always specify the category and then the code. And the set of codes and categories is unique for each jurisdiction. Then the restrictions. The restrictions are the rules that disallow export control, unless there's an exception. Like, for example, it could be that it is not possible to sell items of certain categories to certain countries. When a user is trying to do so for a product, they will be prompted with a specific message on the UI. In the case of Dynamics Supply Chain Management, that will prompt, so they are also aware that they cannot trade that item. And you can determine that message. Exceptions is what allows an action that otherwise would be blocked by the restriction. Common exceptions include blanket exemptions or corporate policies. You will see that the exceptions are defined in the same way as restrictions, and that they can also provide extra requirements, like a message being displayed to the user, or text and licenses that have to be printed on document. The licenses are specific rights to an action granted in specific situations. Authorities issue licenses giving a company specific permissions to trade in restricted items or a set of restricted items in a specific context. It's common practice to specify the license under which an item can be traded for each transaction. So with this, these are the concepts that you will see in export control, and I'll pass it to Jeff so you can see what it brings in a demo.
Thank you, Beatriz. We'll start the demo here with how you acquire the solution. I'm not going to go deep into the configuration and other steps because this is all documented in the documentation, but it's useful to see where you get it from. Installation of the Dataverse application can be done from the Power Platform Admin Center. So for a given environment, you would go to Resources, Dynamics 365 Apps, and then Install App. And in the list of available Dynamics 365 applications, you will find Dynamics 365 Export Control. And from here, you can install the export control solution into your Dataverse environment. As Beatriz mentioned, you do not have to have finance and operations. This can be used standalone in Dataverse. It does consume standard Dataverse capacity, and having a user who's able to make calls into it does require that user be appropriately licensed for Power Platform and for Dataverse. Once we've set up installed the application into the Dataverse environment, then we go into finance and operations and do some configuration. Again, I'm not going to go deep into this, but basically we're telling finance and operations how to make a service-to-service call into Dataverse and what user to use when making that call, because we want to be able to do license control checks on all orders, not just the ones where a given user has rights to make a call. We also have the status section here that goes through each of the steps that I had to do to set up to make this thing work. And you can see right now the application user does not have access to what it needs. So let's go finish setting that up. I'll add the export control application. This is our service-to-service security role. And now that our service user has access, if I refresh, I should see that the status is now complete. I'm ready to go. I can turn on export control functionality in finance and operations. I can track history on things. And when I hit save, now this functionality is on. I can also take the list of country regions that exist in finance and operations and sync them into the Dataverse environment. The reason we do this as a synchronization is, again, because you can use this without finance and operations as well if you choose. But if you're using them together, it's useful if you have the same list of country regions available for what you're doing. Let's jump into the export control jurisdictions. This is the Dataverse application where your compliance officers would be maintaining which jurisdictions apply. These are some of the examples that Beatriz had walked through. So if I jump into the Norwegian Verelist 2, you can see that this jurisdiction is a set of codes, or ECCNs, export control classification numbers, and categories. Many of the regimes around the world use dual use, military, and unlisted as their categorization, but you're not forced to use those categories. For instance, the US export control regulations use things like missile tech, crime control, or marine as their categorizations. Once I've set up the codes and categories that I want to track for this jurisdiction, then I'll set up a set of restrictions. think of restrictions as being the rules as to when this jurisdiction applies. In this case, I can throw a message to the user saying dual-use goods require a license or exemption, and it's an error if the user does not have a license or exemption. This is the structure we use to define rules, and you can see this one is pretty simplistic. It just says if a product is categorized as dual use, then this rule applies. Any of these fields that are left empty mean they're not considered as part of the rule check. If I were to fill this in and say Germany as the ship to country, then this particular rule will only apply if Germany is the ship to country. And I can do similar things for purpose, de minimis, and other aspects. So let's go add an extra restriction here for Norwegian Veralist. I'm going to say military classified goods. And my user message will be, we are unable to ship military classified goods at this time. And this will be type error. And then for the categories or codes, I'm going to say this applies anytime I have a ML category product. So now if the Norwegian Veralist 2 applies to a given sales order and it has a military classified good on there, right now there would be no way for me to ship that order. Exceptions are the cases where even though this jurisdiction does apply, I am allowed to do this particular action. So for instance, in the case of dual use goods, I can still show a message to the user when this exception applies. But as said, in the category of dual use, if a license is found for this product, then the user is allowed to ship this particular product. And you'll see this example in the demo when we get over to finance and operations. And then, of course, the last step is the licenses. Don't think of the licenses here as a full contract lifecycle management application, as obviously there's a lot of deeper functionality involved with that type of thing. But this is a way of expressing the licenses that apply specifically to export control. In this case, I've created a license for prototyping, and under this license, I'm allowed to ship up to 100 items under classification 7A994, worth up to $9,500. And as before with the rules, if anything is filled in, then it's considered as part of whether this license is valid or not. Things that are not filled in, such as the sell to or ship to country, just don't have an impact on this particular rule. So now I've set up my regimes, and we'll use this Norwegian Veralist 2 regime as the jurisdiction as the example that we're going to use in finance and operations. In finance and operations, I can pick which of these jurisdictions apply to which of my legal entities, because your legal entities may be operating from different countries or may be subject to different regulations depending on the type of legal entity. So here I've said my USMF legal entity is applicable with the EAR and Norwegian Veralist export control jurisdictions, and both of these are active in this legal entity. So you can select whichever combinations you want in whichever legal entities. So let's go define a product. In this case, let's say Contoso decides they're going to start selling missile guidance systems, which are pretty clearly subject to export control regulations. So I'll add an MGS02 as a product. Refresh this. Now you'll see a new tab when export control configuration is enabled. And that's why I refreshed, because I just turned export control configuration on. And under here, I can select the jurisdictions and what classification this product falls under for each. So in this case, for the Norwegian Veralist 2, I'm going to say this is classified as 9A610, which is military aircraft and related commodities. The way you specify or choose how to classify these things, that's up to your company. Most customers would pull that in from an external product lifecycle management system or other system. Once I've created my product here, I'll also call out that the jurisdictions show all jurisdictions since products are not specific to a legal entity. I'll now go release this product to a legal entity. Let's pick USMF. And then we'll go find that released inventory item in the EcoRes product details extended form. Under foreign trade for this product, we will see that we've defaulted down whatever export control jurisdictions were defined on the root product definition. And this defaulting follows the same rules as the defaulting for all the other fields on products when you release it to an inventory item. So we defaulted in 7A610, but let's say for this particular legal entity, my corporate compliance officers have determined that it will actually be classified as 7A003.D.1. So I can change it for this legal entity without impacting the rest of the products that are used in other legal entities, and I can override single jurisdictions, whatever I need for that. Let's go sell one of these products on a sales order now. Fresh here too. We'll add MVS03 as a product because I've done a little more setup on this product. Say one item and site number 1. So now I'm trying to sell a dual use good under the sales order, and the Norwegian Veralist 2 regime applies. You'll see under actions, a new option showing up when advanced export control is enabled for checking export control. I can do these ad hoc checks on the sales order whenever I choose to. And you can see here for line number 3, I have a product classified as 7A003.D.1. And currently I'm not able to ship the sales order or confirm it because of that. If I try and confirm, I'll see the same errors as well as it will block that action. Actions restricted based on export control. Dual use goods require a license. So if you remember from my exceptions, I did say for dual use goods, I can set up a license and then I'll be able to ship this. So let's go add that license line. So under this prototype 2341, let's add a new line and say demonstration of MVS02. And we'll let ourselves send one of these 7A003.D.1s under this line. I'm not going to fill in a value. And again, if I don't fill something in, it just means it's not even considered as part of the calculation. So now in my sales order for this line, clear the errors. I can go into the line details for export control and say under the jurisdiction of Norwegian Veralist 2, I'm going to use this license for the prototype. And now if I check export control, you'll see I'm allowed to do it. And the informational message that it's allowed based on a license is displayed here. Now we also have the ability to override this. So let me go remove that license line one more time. Right now, I'm not allowed to ship this, but my corporate compliance officers, if given the right permissions within finance and operations, could say that this is a special case. We want to allow this to happen. And you'll note we track who is doing this, the time at which that particular exemption occurred, etc. So now when I do the check, you can see we're tracking the override, but it is going to allow me to ship this because my corporate compliance officers have analyzed this particular case and said this is something that we are good to do. We can get even more advanced in the rules. Beatriz mentioned PowerFX. Go back into military classified goods. You'll see a section for PowerFX formula. So PowerFX is very similar to Excel formulas if you've ever used those. And we can do more complex things that aren't following the same pattern as the rest of export control. So for instance, if I don't want to be able to sell electronics to Italy unless the sales order was created before January 1st of 2023, I could do something like end document, and you'll see I'm getting IntelliSense here, which is helping me type all this stuff out. And we'll say the ship to country region is Italy, and document dates is greater than 2023, January 1st. So now this is saying this particular restriction only applies to documents shipping to Italy with a document date greater than this. And you can go pretty much as advanced as you want to go with these PowerFX expressions. This allows you to quickly update your business policies based on either corporate changes or some changes in geopolitical or other things which are going to affect your ability to ship a given product. Other examples would be things like adding an informational message on an item anytime saying this is a prototype, anytime we sell a certain type of product to a certain country, etc. The last thing I'll show is call-in from external systems. Because this is a Dataverse solution, I can call into it from anything that can connect to Dataverse, and there are hundreds of connectors out there. So in this case, I'll just show making a Postman request. This might be an external corporate order system where I can send in external documents that finance and operations knows nothing about. We can do the exact same checks here and get the same results, which will block unless I override here. You can see now it's not blocked. So this allows me to both use finance and operations out of the box with this configuration, as well as tie my external systems into it as well. That's the end of the demo. I'll hand it back over to Beatriz.
Thank you, Jeff. So a quick recap of resources and recommendations here. Remember, this comes on release 10.0.36, so you can already play yourselves with it. I'll add that the reason that it is preview is that it is completely new and we want to give ourselves a couple of releases to hear your feedback, see what do you think of it, and incorporate that feedback. But the code is completely GA quality. If you want to jump on it like live, please let us know. There's probably not going to be any issue with that, and we can work with you. Again, there's no additional cost in any sense. You can transition from dual goods use if you're using it, and it is a Dataverse solution. It is important to know here that we provide the Dataverse solution, the framework itself, all the ability to configure the rules, the codes, the categories, the error messages, as Jeff was saying. But we do not provide the data, meaning as Microsoft, we do not provide the specific jurisdictions applying to the US, to Norway, to Europe, and the codes under which you will trade. This is mostly as of Microsoft, we provide the platform, the framework, but we cannot keep constantly updated with all the possible jurisdictions that are out there with the different governments and the different changes that are made over time. So bear in mind that that is something that you would have to do, or you would have to look for another partner or way of keeping that data set of jurisdictions, codes, and categories there available for you. It's your responsibility as a customer to have that updated and to know your rules and jurisdictions regarding export control, and as well your internal ones. Like as Microsoft, we don't want to keep or own any jurisdictions, codes, and categories. So if you want to get started, what you can leverage as resources is, of course, you can always see this presentation will be available in the TechTalk page, and then documentation is already available for you. So you can get into more details into what the specific terms mean, how to do some of the custom rules. So you have it there as well. If you want to share it, if your partner want to share it with your customers on a quick note, see if that works for them, you can use the blog, which is more high level on what the functionality is there. We have created a new Yammer group, if you just Yammer, for product information management, where you can ask questions on export control as well. If you have any new feedback, input, ways in which you would like the functionality to be extended, then please, as any other functionality on Dynamics, supply chain management, direct it to ideas portal, create an idea. We will take all the ideas, same as we do with others, add together, and then we prioritize on the most loaded ideas. If you're unsure on questions on how to set up, you can always ask on the Yammer group. So we will be there from product group and answer your questions. And again, there's as well the dynamic supply chain management community, which is open to everybody. You don't need to be part of a Yammer and the Yammer group. You can just ask any question there. It's open from any browser and see what other people also ask. So with this, we will start taking the questions that you've been asking on the chat. First one is, why is the solution partially sold in Power Platform Dataverse? What are the advantages of it? Do you want to take it, Jeff?
Sure. Some of the early customers that we were working with here have scenarios where they want to be able to use some of the same export control validation logic, but are not finance and operations, do not have our backend ERP. This includes even corporate Microsoft looking at using some of this functionality in some of the areas. So in those cases, we want to make sure that acquisition, deployment, and maintenance doesn't bring with it the heavy weight of also installing a full ERP. So we want it to be available and usable out of the box with our backend ERP, if that's how you're using it. But at the same time, if you're just using this straight from Dataverse and tying external systems into it, we're fully supportive of that as well.
Very similar question. What is the mechanism that this tool is using to sync data between Dataverse and SDM? Is it using dual write?
So broadly, there isn't any data synchronization happening between environments. The one exception to that is syncing the country region list. And that's really a one-time thing. Of course, you can run it again if you choose to, but that's just taking your finance and operations country region list and sending it one time over to Dataverse. And it's just an explicit API call to do that. For everything else, if you're combining external systems together, you just make a standard OData call to the MS-DYNE check export control endpoint and pass in whatever payload you need to do that particular call. So we don't need to copy data between systems. We don't need to set up dual write. We don't need to do any of that in order to light up the export control functionality.
Thanks, Josh. And then another question on, can we limit the quantity per customer?
Quantity and value consumption is part of the licensing functionality. So you could require that given classification, require a license in order to do the activity. And then we will consume both the number of items as well as the value of those items. And value of those items is relatively simplistic out of the box. It's just based on the current value of that line on the sales order. If you try and go above that value with the set of consumption, then the given activity will be blocked. What we're doing in the overall export control configuration section is we're tracking the source application that made the request that consumed the quantity. So you can always go back and figure out which application this came from, which document it was. And in cases where it was some non-Microsoft system, some non-dynamic system, you can make adjustments to those as appropriate, again, based on your user's permissions in the system.
And again, related to what can you do? Do you plan to add a workflow for overriding?
There are rich capabilities already throughout finance and operations and Dynamics as a whole around tying workflows into various stages of these documents, stages of processes. And all the standard extensibility points and connectors that exist in Power Platform are available to you to set up custom workflows in whichever way you need. If there's additional out-of-the-box workflow extensions, experiences, etc., that you would like to see as part of this product, then I'd recommend you post some information on the ideas portal as to that specific scenario, and we'll consider it as part of the backlog with the rest of the product features.
Thank you, Jeff. And another question, are additional user licenses needed if part of the solution sits outside of F&O?
Not unless those users are directly accessing the compliance information. So for instance, if you want to let another user go in and maintain which jurisdictions exist, that user must have the appropriate Dataverse license. You get Dataverse licenses as part of your finance and operations entitlements. Or if this is a non-finance and operations compliance officer, you can buy the Dataverse specific licenses for that. When users are just doing sales orders in finance and operations, that actual license check is happening as a service-to-service call, and so it's not based on individual user licensing.
Thank you, Jeff. Then we'll jump to, you showed us that the sales order confirmation can be blocked. Do we have the same control on the packing slip or invoice?
Yes, we have tie-ins for the purpose of the document for the standard document stages. It's in finance and operations, there are a variety of ways you can do various types of corrections or other types of deeper things, say directly through the general ledger. Obviously, we're not tied into that level of customization. But generally, the standard life cycles that a sales order would go through from confirmation, shipping, picking, packing, invoicing, those stages are supported by the system out of the box.
And a very similar question is asking if we have integrations into any of the sales document, like the sales invoice to our remarks on restricted items.
No, at this point, the sales order is the only document type that we've tied in out of the box from finance and operations. Similar to the previous question, if you have scenarios for other types of documents you think would be useful here, please post them in the ideas portal, and based on the votes there and the number of customers that are upvoting that type of thing, it'll be considered for additional future implementation.
And now we are coming to a more broader open topic kind of question. It seems to be powerful, but what will be the future of regulated products, restricted products?
Do you want to take that one?
Yes, I can take that one. So, like as Microsoft, we provide the application, we provide the platform to support your businesses. We want to support you in being successful in whatever business you're in. So that is why we have provided this advanced export control, given the customer feedback that we've had that this was in for you. So in that sense, we will continue providing the application and platform capabilities to support you on your businesses. But again, keep in mind that all jurisdictions, codes set up, it's your ownership to stay compliant with those export control rules that are in the countries you operated, in the internal rules that you may have. So in that sense, the future is, as Microsoft, we hear your feedback. We want to support your supply chains, but keep in mind that we are there to support you and your business. So there are no more questions left. We will just leave it here. Thanks a lot for your time. We hope this was useful to you. And if you need any more help, please reach out to the channels we just presented. Thank you.